of the best independent show in sports. We're going to be going over the entire NBA trade deadline. We're going to go over each team's trades here. Some of them will dwell on longer for sure. Some of them we'll just skip over as a shout out. And then we're also previewing the Super Bowl. Yes, it is that time where we're going over the Super Bowl, who we think is going to win the last NFL game of the year until we go into purgatory where we're watching slip and slide on ESPN and we're like, what is even happening in the summer right now? And you consider watching the WNBA. Then also some of the NFL honors going along. But starting with the NBA, it's the NBA trade deadline today as we're recording this, and we're recording this at night after it's all taken place. And Dennis Schroeder has described the NBA trade deadline as modern slavery. He thinks just the way that you can get traded from team to team, you don't have a say in it. And if you're a role player, well, if I had the ability to turn down a 4 year, $80 million contract, I would also feel like a slave too. I don't know about you, but like turning down $80 million, just, oh, someone forced me to turn that down. Like, okay, maybe I would have been a slave too. And maybe you wouldn't have gotten traded because no one would want your awful contract.
You know, it's funny because Dennis Schroeder, he got passed like a blunt in this trade deadline. First, he started this game on the Warriors, and then he gets traded for the Jimmy Butler trade, which we'll go over in a second. And then the Heat go, actually, you can go to the Jazz. The Jazz take on his contract, and then the Jazz go, actually, you're going to Detroit. So he went from going to Golden State to Miami
Nice.
to Utah to Detroit. Like he had all the emotions. Going from San Francisco to Miami, it's like, all right, that's dope. Going to Utah, I'm like, okay, that's less cool, but that's not too bad. And then you go to Detroit to end it. Like, you want to talk about being let down three consecutive times potentially, depending on how you feel about Florida. Like, that's a tough blow. So I mean, I understand why he's upset, but also, you're Dennis Schroeder. You're the type of guy that gets traded 4 times in a trade deadline because you're just one of those players that you're good enough to be on an NBA roster, but you're bad enough that we don't care about you. So yeah, that's how it is.
Hey man,
Sorry.
FIBA MVP Dennis Schroeder. Like, put some respect on his name. MVP
Let
for Germany in that tournament. I mean, he's played out of his mind, but yeah, Dennis Schroeder going in there. It's like when they like talk about it, it's like I get it. It's gonna be like a controversial statement where you're feeling passed around, where you're going from San Francisco, which is nice, nice homeless people, nice beach town there, and then you go to Miami. Like, that's cool, a lot of fun that you can get in when you're a millionaire in Miami. Then you go to Utah. I'm like, okay, secluded mountain city. I can talk myself into the Mormons, I guess. And then you just end up in Detroit. But like, are you a modern slave if you can turn down $80 million? No, I don't think so. And you get paid to play a sport that is a status symbol in the world that gives you so many other exclusive opportunities. But like, no one made you play basketball. It'd be one thing if you worked at, say, a financial company, we'll say Vanguard, and then Vanguard came to BlackRock and he's like, all right, BlackRock, we are willing to trade Brick Jameson and the rights to one of our mutual funds for one of your employees here. And then we're going to trade you for someone, other random person at BlackRock, and you're only making like $80,000 a year. But when you're making millions of dollars a year, it's like you play 40 games a year in your city. You only have to live there part time. And then in the summer, you can travel the world and do whatever you want to do. Like, how is that being a slave? I don't understand it, but I guess that's what Dennis Schroeder thinks of the trade deadline. Let us know if you feel like a slave during the trade deadline, because I do when I'm working my job. But yeah,
Yeah. You know what's funny? This is going to be Dennis Schroeder's eighth team. This man has been passed like a blunt, genuinely. Played for the Hawks, he played for the Thunder, Lakers, Celtics, Raptors, Warriors, and now he's playing for Detroit. Like this man, if anybody feels this way, it makes sense that it's coming out of Dennis Schroeder's mouth and not say Jimmy Butler, who just got traded along with this package. Dennis Schroeder, best of luck in Detroit. At least now you can be a Lions fan. I guess that's a good thing. But Jimmy Butler, the big part of this trade, he goes to Golden State. The Heat get Andrew Wiggins, Kyle Anderson, Davion Mitchell, a first. Jazz are in this trade like they are with every other fucking trade we're going to talk about with the NBA. And then we have Jazz getting Josh Richardson, couple of seconds, KJ Martin, and then the Pistons. Big part of that is Dennis Schroeder, and then fucking Lindy Waters the third. Watch out for them in Detroit in a second. But yeah, thoughts on the main part of it? Jimmy Butler going to Golden State. Andrew Wiggins goes to Miami. Does this change your sentiment on the Warriors at all?
Yeah, it does for me. And I know Jimmy Butler's been injured and hasn't played this year. Like, Jimmy Butler is just one of those NBA players that everyone loves to hate for no reason, where people will shove Joel Embiid down your throat. They'll shove someone like Paul George or Donovan Mitchell and talk about how great they are. But like, no, Jimmy Butler is a bum. He's the only one of these other stars like Paul George, like a James Harden out there who's kind of like a top of tier two, but not quite a tier one star. He's the one of the only other stars to get his team to the NBA Finals as the best player, not once, but twice. Giannis has done that. Devin Booker has done that. Um, and then Jokic has done it. And then outside of that, we're looking at Jason Tatum, who's gotten to the finals and win. And then it's really just LeBron and Steph Curry in this era right now. But like Jimmy Butler has gotten a team to the finals twice. He did it one time in the bubble, but he proved that it wasn't a fluke and he got them to the finals again. And then he ended up beating a stacked Celtics team and then overcame then and got the Miami Heat to the finals. He ended up getting swept, but like that Miami team had no business being there. And the fact that now Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry are 1A and 1B when they really just needed another star on this team who can go out there, control tempo. Like, I feel like this is a good matchup because Jimmy Butler is underrated as a facilitator. And those finals runs in Miami, what he was really doing was playing point forward, facilitating the offense. So, with that role in Golden State, I actually like Jimmy Butler in the situation a lot. I don't know what your initial reaction to this trade was, but like, him and Steph Curry, they're the same age pretty much, and they signed him to a 2-year extension, and it lines up with Steph Curry's timeline a lot better than it did with Dallas, where we're trying to line up Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving. Like, no, lining up Jimmy Butler and Steph Curry makes sense. Maybe you don't make the finals this year, but next year, yeah, people are going to want to go play with you. And this just makes me happy that you went out there and got Steph Curry another star. So, yes, I do think this will help Golden State in the long run. Now, do they get to the finals this year? No, but if you're Oklahoma City and you're going up against Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. That's not like a great matchup for you. Maybe they can't stop someone like Jokic, but they're going to give a lot of teams hell. They could beat a team like the Rockets. They could beat some of these other young teams as long as Jimmy Butler's healthy. And he's usually there when he actually cares about the situation he's in.
Yeah, I my first sentiment here was I'm glad he went to Golden State. I know that the Suns were talking about getting him. I didn't love his fit on the Suns, especially when they were talking about like getting rid of potentially Kevin Durant, a part of the deal. I'm like, why would you get rid of Kevin Durant for Jimmy Butler? That just doesn't make sense. But him going to Golden State, I'm happy for him. I don't think it moves the Warriors much up for me. He's definitely an improvement from Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins is a fine player, but he's just too inconsistent. So him going to Miami, it makes more sense for Miami with the pieces that they have. He fits a lot better there. And then Jimmy Butler, like Golden State, if they can go out there and get a couple of additional role players this offseason, then I do think they can be like a second round team. But I think my thing is like they are a lot older. I'd like them to ideally get a younger star that they can build around outside of Steph as he gets older. But again, like I don't think it makes them that much better. I think they go from a playing tournament team to like probably the sixth seed at this point with what they're doing. But nice step in the right direction. They desperately needed a shakeup. So I mean, I like it overall, but good for Jimmy Butler for going to Golden State, and I think the pairing will be successful.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it'll be successful. And, with the Warriors, it matches up their timeline. And, getting a young star for me isn't as important. What's most important is that we go all in the last years of Steph Curry's career because he's earned that. I don't care if your franchise is never good again. You were never good before without Steph Curry. Sure, you had Rick Barry. Great. Rick Barry was on your team before. And oh, we beat the 1 seed one time as the ace seed. Wasn't it so magical? Like, shut the fuck up. You weren't an iconic franchise before Steph Curry got there. Then you just get lucky that the Timberwolves passed on him twice and the Clippers looked at Blake Griffin and Steph Curry. They're like, the guy who has ball handling, can shoot from the half court, or the guy who can shoot from 5 feet away, and that's it, and he dunks. Okay, and like
He
he
dunks
took
over a
like
Kia.
yeah, he dunked over Ikea. Like, you'd say what you will about Skip Bayless, but maybe his greatest take of all time is that I would have taken Steph Curry #1 overall in that draft over Blake Griffin. And he was saying it at the time of that draft. Like, Skip Bayless has a lot of bad takes, but sometimes he'll have a gem in there. And this was one of them. And you owe it to Steph Curry to go all in and get someone like Jimmy Butler. Like, this is the trade that I wanted to happen. And the Warriors were kind of like, out of it, and they're like, "Oh, will we give up Andrew Wiggins?" And really, the person holding them back from getting rid of Andrew Wiggins was Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr was so emotional after those trades. Like, we wouldn't have won the NBA Finals in 2022 without Andrew Wiggins. Like, okay, so what? If you take away Dante DiVincenzo, are you saying the same thing? Like, Andrew Wiggins played great in that series, but that was Steph Curry's moment. And then you're gonna be like, "Oh, we need Andrew Wiggins, and we wouldn't have won the finals without him." Like, bitch, are you gonna be like, "Oh, we wouldn't have won the finals without Harrison Barnes," and then we're not gonna give up Harrison Barnes for Kevin Durant? Like, you gave up Andrew Wiggins for a player that was the best player on a team that got to the finals, not once, but twice. What are we talking about? And he was like emotional with his head hung low. Now he has to deal with Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler. Like, oh, you mean you have to coach and do your job and put personalities together? Like, crazy how that works.
We also are forgetting to mention that Jimmy Butler did it with his number two being Tyler Harrow at one point, or maybe you can say Bam Adebayo, but like he did it with like a not great second star. It wasn't with a Kyrie Irving or a Klay Thompson or Kevin Durant. This was with Bam Adebayo, who is a good big man. He's definitely, I feel, underrated, but he didn't do it with the best supporting cast, and he carried that team both in the bubble and then outside of the bubble too. So he deserves his flowers there. You're getting a guy who does can lighten the load for Steph offensively, where he can be a bucket anytime he wants, and then he's more efficient, which I think is the big thing. He also, I think, is going to maximize the rest of the team. Maybe we'll finally see Jonathan Kaminga, a guy that, if I want anybody to see me as fondly, I want to find a love where they love me as much as the Warriors love Jonathan Kaminga. Because genuinely, for a guy who I think is a fine player, they treat Jonathan Kaminga like the royal prince, for Christ's sake. He will not be traded at any cost. But yeah, Jimmy Butler, he's more efficient, fits the same role, and I think he has the same timeline as Steph. He wants to get his ring. He's been very close, and his legacy is going to be a lot better if he can get a ring, especially solidifying Steph's legacy at the same time.
Yeah, no, and he maximizes them. And also, like, you mentioned that, like, Tyler Harrow was hurt the second time that they got to the finals, but like he got to the finals one time with Tyler Harrow and Duncan Robinson, and then the second time it was with Max Struess, Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin. What are those guys doing today? What are they doing? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. I didn't hear what they're doing right now because they're not. Max Struess went to Cleveland, which is the perfect place for him because he's shaped like a pierogi. And then Caleb Martin got signed by the 76ers and then immediately got traded to Dallas. And then Gabe Vincent went to LA and died. We haven't heard from him. Last thing I heard, he was just stuck in the fires, and then we've never heard from him since. But it's like all of these guys he took to the finals aren't doing anything anywhere else.
Yeah, they pretty much went there to die. Actually, one of the guys that we'll go over later with the trades, Caleb Martin got traded. But I haven't seen Caleb Martin since that finals. Who knows? I thought he went to the Lakers. Then I see that he's getting traded from another team that I didn't even know he played for. So
Philly, yeah.
yeah, it's a complete mess. Yeah, I forgot he even signed with the Sixers. I forgot all about that. But he's on the
Yeah.
move anyways. But yeah, win for the Warriors. I think it makes them a little bit more interesting. Makes the NBA more interesting when the Warriors are good, but I like it. Some other trades we got. The Raptors get PJ Tucker. That's cool from the Heat.
Yeah, why is PJ Tucker still getting traded? Like, you want to talk about a guy who's like, if anyone has a right to say they're a slave, like Chris Paul and PJ Tucker. Like, PJ Tucker, like, and Chris Paul embrace, like, playing for every team.
Yeah, I mean, let me look at how many teams this motherfucker has played for. He's played for the Raptors, the Suns, the Rockets, another stint in in Houston. He got the Clippers, the Sixers, the Heat, the Bucks. and now he's going to be playing for the I just missed it. Where was it? He's going to the Raptors again. So PJ Tucker, you want to talk about a guy who gets passed around? He gets passed around like your local sorority girl.
Yeah.
So good for him. Best wishes there.
Well,
Um,
at least Canada will be a part of America soon.
right.
So
And then the Dennis Schroeder trade we already talked about here. Wizards land Reggie Jackson from the 76ers. They also get a first round pick in return. Good for the Wizards. They made a lot of trades this past couple of days, so good for them. Get a nice role player. That's cool.
congrats. They traded Kyle Kuzma to the Bucks as well.
Yeah, Kyle Kuzma goes to the Bucks, and this package was I know that in return they get Chris Middleton. That's kind of the main meat and potatoes of that trade. I felt it was time for them to move on from Chris Middleton, and that team was I think the biggest issue with that Bucks team has been their age. I just felt like they were a lot older, and they kind of needed to do a shakeup. So as much as I think Kyle Kuzma, there's a lot of potential there. I think that it just makes them a little bit younger, a little bit more athletic, a little bit quicker. So I like the Kyle Kuzma trade. Now, if they can just maximize his potential, then I think they'll be great. But I don't know if it's going to move them too much for me. I think they're still where they were before.
Is he as valuable as the Thanasis, though? That's the thing.
It depends on how good he can hold a clipboard.
Like the thing with the Thanasis, though, like with the Bucks, is like the way Stephen A explained Thanasis, and I feel like it makes a lot of sense. Is like Giannis is coming from Greece. He's from like a European country, so like he actually has someone who understands him, his culture, how he grew up, and like speaks his language as well. Whereas like when you're on an NBA team, it's like you're on the road. It can get lonely out there for sure. So he like keeps Giannis locked in. So I feel like he's like actually someone who was valuable. But like Kuzma on this team, like I'm glad you got something for Chris Middleton, because do I think like Kuzma will be like a game changer? No, I think he's going to be exactly the same as Pat Connaughton, Bobby Portis, and Brooke Lopez. Where damn, they have some great games in the regular season, but as far as when the playoff comes around, all of those guys simultaneously disappear when Giannis needs their help. Brooke Lopez is nowhere to be found. Bobby Portis, you know, he just turns into Salty the Songbook and goes off and sings somewhere. And then Pat Connaughton suddenly can't make threes anymore. And I think Kuzma will have like a game each series where maybe he shows up, but like it's like more like you move on from Middleton. He's had some injury issues and he's just not the same player anymore. But like really for this team, like I think the Bucks you can make the finals if Dame and Giannis are both healthy. Because I've seen Dame get to the conference championship. Giannis has already got to the finals. It's just going to be, can you play defense at this point? Because Kuzma doesn't help there, but he's just at least a younger, more athletic player.
Yeah, and I think we'll see what Doc Rivers can get out of Kyle Kuzma if they can maximize him there. But I like the trade for the Bucks though. Overall, I think that's a good move.
And then
We had
I was gonna
we had
say the Heat got the Thunder got your favorite player in a trade from the Pelicans. They
Daniel Tice.
Daniel Tice.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, awesome. I mean, the Thunder, they already have some pretty decent big men, but Daniel Tice, he's a solid role player. He's been around a lot of different teams, very successful with the Celtics at that time. Good for them. I think that bolsters their big man position. I like it for them.
Yeah, him and Hartenstein, and he's also another big who can shoot threes too. And then
Yeah,
another traveling center. The Kings making a lot of moves at the deadline. They got Jonas Valanciunas, and they traded City Sissoko and two future second round picks. So now you have Valanciunas on that team with Davion Mitchell, and you have
that's Zach
reunited
Levine now.
DeMar DeRozan and Zach Levine. So the
Yeah,
Kings, can they be an interesting team? Maybe. With Sabonis and Valanciunas, do they fit? But at least you have a solid big man on the floor. And I feel like the big man's coming back a little bit slowly into the NBA, where now you need a big man, but he just has to shoot threes.
yeah, I agree. I think the Kings are fun. I think they kind of remind me of like the Western Conference Bulls for a lot of years. Like we saw the Bulls with DeMar DeRozan, we saw the Bulls with they had like the Andre Drummonds of the world. Zach Levine was obviously there. Feels like the Kings are essentially what the Bulls are, but in the West, where they're fun. They have like nice players, but I see them as a play-in tournament team still. Um, but they're in rebuild, which is nice. Um, Speaking of players here, we talked about Caleb Martin earlier. Caleb Martin goes to the Mavericks to pair him with their superstar Anthony Davis. That's right, not Luca. Which we've gone over that in much detail to this point. But
Hey, he can play the four now, which is really important to Anthony Davis. In the modern NBA, Anthony Davis doesn't feel like he should be playing center. I mean, my God, if Kevin Garnett was in the NBA now, he would be a center. Dirk Nowitzki would be a center, but Anthony Davis, for some reason, is obsessed with playing the four. I don't get it.
yeah, that's a weird anomaly for Mr. Davis. But now he can respectfully play where he decides he wants to play. So good for him, I suppose. And then some other deals. I know that the Suns traded away Joseph Nurkic to. Let me see if I can find exactly where he went. I don't know if this trade is updated for me, but they traded away Nurkic. I believe he went to the Hornets, if I'm not mistaken. Do you see that trade there?
Um, yeah, mine's not pulling up. There's like some trades missing on the NBA.com trade tracker, to be honest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a couple of trades missing here for me too. Marvin Bagley got traded again. Remember Marvin Bagley, the guy that was picked
Yeah.
ahead of Luca? Just like him, he is on the move. He is now going to Memphis. Good for you. You have a draft bust on your team at this point. Congrats. Oh, I didn't see this here. Marcus Smart also gets traded. He goes to the Wizards along with this trade.
What?
Alex Len
Marcus
and
Smart
Colby
and
Jones.
Jordan Poole together?
Yep. Yep.
God.
Holy matrimony.
What are the Wizards doing at this point? Like the Wizards and the Jazz. Like the Jazz, I think they set the record for being involved in the most trades, but like the past 2 years, I feel like we could do a whole episode on like the Jazz's trade just the past 3 years since Danny Ainge has got there. And then just like we could go over that for an hour and be like, all right, now what?
Yeah. Now you're just no. Yeah, exactly. Like, what are you at this point? I do see the Nurkic trade. So the Suns trade away their only first round pick they have and Joseph Nurkic to the Hornets. They get Cody Martin and Vasilje Mishik in a second round pick. As a person who is very close to the Suns organization, why did you trade Nurkic? He was a nice piece for you. And in return, you'd get a couple of role players, which is fine. But I just don't. For the Suns, it doesn't make any sense. For the Hornets, I think that's a nice fit for them. They just made a trade with the Lakers too. That we'll go over in a second. But um, Hornets get a fine big man, and the Suns got smaller and got okay role players in return. Nice, I guess.
Yeah, I just think Kevin Durant hated Nurkic. I really think that's the reason why he was traded. There's like a lot of just like videos of Kevin Durant yelling at Nurkic, and he's just one of those players that you can move. And the Suns are like, I guess we'll make a move to make a move, so our local radio has something to talk about. And they're not like, why didn't the Suns do anything? It's like at least you traded Nurkic, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose. Another big trade that occurred was the Lakers acquire Mark Williams from the Hornets, which I think the reason why the Hornets made that trade. Hornets get the only rookie that the Lakers have, Dalton Necht and Cam Reddish, and then they swapped a couple of picks here as well. But Lakers get a young big man who's had injury issues, but Doncic wanted him. He wanted a big man that he can do the pick and roll with, and now the Lakers have some size that they desperately needed after trading away Anthony Davis. Thoughts on them getting Mark Williams?
Yeah, I think you needed a center, so you went out there and you got whoever was available. So I respect it. And really, for this team to succeed in the playoffs, like they need a lot of defense. So, but I do think that people are just going to write off the Lakers immediately. Like LeBron is still playing well, and LeBron is going to be the two on this team. Like Anthony Davis was never the number one on the Lakers. LeBron was still always the alpha on that team. And now that you have Luca, like LeBron is like happy to defer to Luca, and this might be the first time in LeBron's career where he's happy to defer to him. Like, it's not that him and Kyrie he deferred to Kyrie Irving in that final series. It was just that they were both going so nuclear that they were always on, and it wasn't like a will I defer to you or not. So I feel like he's gonna let Luca take over, and this team can make some noise in the playoffs. But I think it's a nice trade. Um, Another trade I like, though, maybe the sneakiest trade of the deadline, was the Cavs trading for DeAndre Hunter from the
Hmm.
Atlanta Hawks. DeAndre Hunter's averaging 19 points a game, which is his career best. He's been able to fill it up, and then you get rid of Karis LeVert, and then you get rid of the Krispy Kreme himself, George Niang. Like, Niang is just one of those players that I watch the NBA and I'm like, I hate that guy for no reason. And no offense to George Niang, but like when you watch him play, he just has like that Kyle Anderson type of aura around him.
Yeah. Yeah, I like this move a lot for them. DeAndre Hunter's one of those guys that he was drafted super high, and it felt like it took him a while to get his rhythm going, but lately he's been excelling. He's shooting 46% from the field. And I just feel like with the way the Hawks were set up, he just didn't fit well within them. But the Cavs, he should do just fine there. And I like him fitting there a lot. And you
Yeah,
didn't
and
really have
then
to give up that much.
yeah, no, you didn't have to give up too much for him. So Karis LeVert and George Niang, that's definitely a fair trade there. And then another trade that happened, we had a sad day for the entire nation of Canada. You had someone who had come home, and he had been home for a few years now. And Canada, I know you're going through a lot right now. The threat of your country going through a hostile takeover because you're being subsidized for hundreds of billions of dollars, and now you're trying to be made the 51st state, but you lost someone who is close to you, one of the few NBA players from Canada, and he was on your team in Toronto, a real local boy. But unfortunately, you have to trade Kelly Olynyk and Bruce Brown to the New Orleans Pelicans, and you get back Brandon Ingram, who, if he could make one layup versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, that may not have been a sweep because the first few games are actually really entertaining in that series. And anytime Brandon Ingram stepped on the court, the entire team got dragged down. But good for the Raptors. You got Brandon Ingram. Congratulations. And now you have CJ McCollum, Bruce Brown on that team. Now you have Kelly Olynyk. Like, you kind of have a fun team still going here. So like the Pelicans are kind of like a sneaky team, but you just get rid of Brandon Ingram because you don't want to pay him. So you might as well get something back for him. So I thought this was actually a really good deal for the Pelicans. And Bruce Brown's going to be another valuable asset. And I feel like he's the reason why the Nuggets didn't make it back to the finals last year, is because they just didn't have that one guy who could come up and put points off the bench.
Yeah, I think this is a great fit for the Pelicans. I think it'll make them competitive. Right now, they are not very good. They've lost 7 straight games, but I think that he helps them add a spark. I also think that with an expiring contract like Brandon Ingram, you didn't want to sign him. Maybe he's not worth the max to you. The Raptors can take on that contract. Raptors are in rebuild. They probably won't bring him back. So he can go and hit free agency on his own. And Pelicans can continue to build their capital. They get 2 picks out of this too. So it's a win for the Pelicans, I would say. And Raptors, I guess, you get somebody who can, you know, average 20, I guess.
Yeah, no, you can definitely get someone there. And then, yeah, so Jimmy Butler there, Valanciunas. And then there's the other trade. I think the last interesting trade was the Lakers getting Bogdanovich and then giving up Dalton Net. I don't know if you saw that video earlier this season of JJ Redick screaming at Dalton Neck, where he's like, "It's your fucking play! What the hell are you doing?" And then he called timeout, and then he just chewed this guy out in the huddle, and he's gone now. He's out of there. And honestly, this was an important trade because you go out there and you get Bogdanovich, and now you have him, who's someone who can go out there and absolutely just shoot the lights out. I mean, that series where the Hawks pushed the Celtics 6 games, it was really because Bogdanovich would come in and sometimes he just couldn't miss. So I feel like now you add an elite shooter with Luka and LeBron. You got your center and Mark Williams, who will be fine for you in the playoffs. And Luka elevates the players around him, and you have Austin Reeves. So now if you have a lineup of Luka, Austin Reeves, Bogdanovich, LeBron James, and Mark Williams, that'll work. That'll work.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't win the finals, but I think that's a solid lineup, and it will be able to put up a lot of points. And then Austin Reeves will be able to play defense, but damn, they better hit a lot of threes because they're going to have a ton of points scored against them.
Yeah, honestly, that's the big thing. But I think with the Lakers, You have someone like LeBron, who I think he's looking for his fifth title. You have Luca, who has shown to be a playoff performer. And then we saw Austin Reeves show up big the last few playoff runs as well. So I like the way the Lakers are constructed now. I think that they don't really have much expectations for this year, but next year, especially if this might be LeBron's last year, that I see them going potentially all in free agency, stocking up on these role players that they have, building up their bench, and then Lakers should be a real problem moving forward when it comes to um, competing in the West at this point.
Yeah, because now the Lakers, like, they acquired some pretty good trade pieces, but we've pretty much gone over all the important trades here, all the big names that moved, and a lot of smaller trades too, like homeboy, like Kelly Olynyk getting traded, friend of the show, Kelly. And then now I said before the trade deadline, I was like, it felt like the last couple of years have been kind of slow. Not too much has happened, but do you feel like that this has maybe been the best trade deadline you've ever seen in your life?
Okay, well, just think about all the different, like the big three trades that occurred, right? We had the most monumental trade in NBA history, seismic trade. Luka Doncic goes to the Lakers, which changes and makes the Lakers way more interesting. And honestly, even the Mavericks too. And then De'Aaron Fox goes to the Spurs, which makes the Spurs extremely interesting again. And then you get Jimmy Butler to the Warriors, and the Warriors are suddenly interesting again. So you have these big superstars, right? The Warriors finally have their second guy. The Lakers have their future with Luca. They're going to be good for the next decade at least. The Mavericks, they make their trade. They at least get Anthony Davis so that their team maybe has more chemistry there too. And then with De'Aaron Fox, we have Wemby getting his sidekick essentially. So, I mean, just for the history of the NBA that's unraveling before us, those are huge. And then these little tiny deals like De'Aaron Fox to the Cavs and Bogdan, these different role players that are traded. Like these are moves that we don't notice now, but when it comes down to the playoffs, these are the guys that could make a huge move. Maybe Kyle Kuzma has a great series against the Celtics, and that's the reason why the Bucks beat the Celtics potentially in the NBA playoffs. So I think this is the best trade deadline, honestly, of our lifetime. I don't know if there's any other trade deadline that matches that, honestly. So I would say it's probably the best deadline ever.
Yeah. No, I agree. At least in recent memory. But hey, with recency bias in the media, anytime you have see anything in the media, you have to be like, I've never seen anything like this before in my life. This is the craziest deadline end game I've seen simultaneously. So you just have to go balls to the wall and go after it. So yes, I'm gonna say that this is the craziest deadline I've ever seen because we saw Luca get traded. We saw Jimmy Butler get moved. And then, we've had so many other trades. We had Brandon Ingram moving around, so many like B-list stars, Kyle Kuzma getting traded again, Dennis Schroeder getting traded 4 times. It's like he's like the trade deadline's like modern slavery, and the NBA was like, okay, torture this man and just like tease him where he's gonna go. And they just fired right back at him.
Yeah, honest to God. I like it. I like it a lot. The NBA is much more interesting. When the football season is over, NBA is going to be back in the fold and back to being exciting again. Now, to talk about the sport that we all love, the NFL. This is the swan song in the NFL season. We have the NFL honors, which we just had some huge awards come through when we were talking about the NBA. We have the Super Bowl. They announced the Hall of Fame. We'll talk about the Super Bowl to end the show, but as far as like, do we talk about honors or Hall of Fame first? Which one should we bang out first?
Yeah, we can talk about the Hall of Fame first.
All
Who
right.
made the Hall
So,
of Fame this year? Who got snubbed?
yeah. Do you have the Hall of Fame up in front of you?
Yeah, let me get that pulled up here. But the biggest story coming out of it was Eli Manning was a Hall of Fame snub. And we both said when the list came out, we don't mind if Eli Manning is a Hall of Famer. We just don't want to see him be a first ballot Hall of Famer, especially with how many times T.O. was passed. And if you look at his stats as far as a regular season quarterback, he's like below average and compared to like modern NFL quarterbacks. He's bad right now. So with Eli Manning not being the Hall of Fame first ballot, do you think this makes sense even though he won two Super Bowls?
Yeah. I mean, if you have to ask yourself, and think about it deeply, if he's the MVP, I'm sorry, if he's the Hall of Famer, then he shouldn't be a first ballot Hall of Famer. We have the Terrell Owens of the world, we have the Michael Irvins of the world, we have plenty of other people who had to wait their turn to become Hall of Famers, and I just feel like he's too much of a borderline Hall of Famer for him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. At that point, I would feel like it's nepotism there, him getting in there. But luckily, the NFL Hall of Fame did the right thing.
Yeah, no, the Hall of Fame did the right thing, and I agree with this. Like, I don't think he deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, especially when he's like probably the worst quarterback in his draft class. Like, I still think Philip Rivers is a better quarterback. Ben Roethlisberger is clearly the best quarterback in that draft class, arguably the number 3 or 2 quarterback of his era. Even though there are a lot of guys, but you could argue 3 or 4 for him, but he was definitely always in the conversation there, got to the Super Bowl 3 times, and then statistically was a monster in the regular season. Where Eli like led the league in turnovers 3 times. Like that's not Hall of Fame stuff for me.
And he was a 500 quarterback. He had a bunch of turnovers, as you mentioned. And then if you eliminate those two playoff runs, he's really like his numbers just don't pale in comparison. But he is a Manning.
Yeah,
He did take down the undefeated Patriots. You can't talk about the history of the NFL without him. So I think he'll eventually get the call. But who made the Hall of Fame and who didn't
yeah.
in this list?
So first, the Hall of Fame class of 2025, we have one of the most prolific pickers in NFL history, Eric Allen. After his 19th year of eligibility and second finalist year, his wait was longer than his pro career, which lasted 4 seasons and spanned with 3 franchises. Allen was a pick of the Eagles in 1998 and then flew around the secondary for 7 years, reaching 6 Pro Bowls, earning a first team All Pro nod in his sophomore campaign. Eric Allen, 19 years of eligibility. And I read that because I saw he made the Hall of Fame, and I'm like, who the fuck is Eric Allen? And I feel like you had the exact same reaction, but he has waited 19 years to go to the Hall of
Uh,
Fame, and his career was 14 seasons.
this man retired when I. This man retired in 2001. Okay. And there's a 5 year wait. So he has not played in the league in 25 years, essentially, by the time the NFL season begins. My question is like baseball, the way baseball does it is that they have a 10-year period where you can be elected in. And if you're not elected, if it takes you a decade to get into the Hall of Fame, then you're as borderline as it possibly gets. But it used to be 15 years for baseball. And then they had fucking like Jim Rice wait 15 years. I'm like, all right, maybe they're a borderline Hall of Fame. Eric Allen, basically 20 years. He had a full career of just trying to get into the Hall of Fame, and now he's in. Like, good for him. He was a fine player. It looks like he was a 6 time Pro Bowler, and he was really elite at one point. But 20 years took him 20 years to get in the Hall of Fame. Like that, where are your limitations? Like, when do you just take him off the ballot at that point? If he can't get in after 20 years, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, no. It says Allen finished 8th in Defensive Player of the Year voting, like the best year of his career. And then he wrapped up his career in New Orleans and Oakland.
Nice. Well,
Okay.
yeah. I
And
mean,
then,
he had 54 picks. That's cool.
so this is kind of like the Hall of Fame class of Allen because right after him, a player we all know, Jared Allen, who's a Hall of Famer,
Yes.
prolific
Yes.
pass rusher for the Minnesota Vikings, one of the greatest players in Minnesota Vikings pathetic history, which we'll dive into in the offseason. But he invented the calf roping challenge. He was actually a really good guest on the Manning cast this year. But Jared Allen, prolific defensive end for the Minnesota Vikings, great player in the NFL, definitely deserving. So I have no problem with this, especially he's a Midwestern calf roping redneck. You love to see it.
Yeah. Plus, he had a period of time where he had 7 consecutive 10 sack seasons. He was a first team All Pro 4 out of those 7 consecutive seasons, and then a Pro Bowler in all the other seasons. So he's got 136 sacks. He's second all time in single season sacks. He had 22 in 2011. Like, you want to talk about like one of the best edge rushers of all time, like Jared Allen absolutely deserves it.
Yeah, Jared Allen deserves it. So we have Eric Allen, and then we have Jared Allen. So there's like, you know what? We don't think this is a great Hall of Fame class, so let's put two Allens in there, like the year of Allen,
Sure.
and then we'll give Josh Allen the MVP too, and we'll sweep all of the awards with people with the last name Allen. But after that, we have probably another most deserving player in here, Antonio Gates.
Absolutely.
Antonio Gates, he was just one of those players where he just played forever. It felt like where he was old by the time we started watching football, and he had a 16-year career, a three-time first All-Pro player in 4 years of his career. Antonio Gates was an instant contributor to the San Diego Chargers. Philip Rivers' favorite target. They set a lot of records as far as quarterback tight end duos together, put up a lot of points. But Antonio Gates, worthy Hall of Famer. You happy for Antonio Gates?
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to talk about like top five tight ends of all time, then Antonio Gates is in that conversation, right? Obviously, we have the Kelseys and the Gronks and the Tony Gonzalez's of the world, but I feel like Antonio Gates is right after those three are mentioned. Um, with how dominant he was, I feel like he played a part in kind of revolutionizing the tight end position. I think Gronk and Kelsey obviously expanded them a lot more, but I mean, he had 2,000 yard seasons. He was a five-time All Pro player, and again, like you can't when you think about the tight end position and the impact that the 2000s and the 2010s had, he single-handedly, like him and a number of other great tight ends, helped solidify that as being a core receiving target for their quarterback. So absolutely deserving, one of the best of all
Yeah.
time.
And then the final NFL Hall of Famer this year, Sterling Sharp. Yeah, that's right. Sterling
Ooh.
Sharp, brother of Shannon Sharp, who played 7 years in the who played in the NFL, and then he was three time three times he was a first all pro player. He was a five-time Pro Bowler, and Sharp led the league in receptions three times in his 7 seasons. So yeah, Sterling Sharp, one of Brett Favre's favorite targets, who had a short career, which is I feel like why he wasn't considered for the Hall of Fame. But like, do I think he's a Hall of Fame quality player? Absolutely. So glad to see that he's finally getting some recognition here. He's also been a coach in high school sports as well and been involved in college. So glad to see Sterling Sharp getting a nod here over Eli Manning, because was he a better player at football than Eli Manning? Absolutely. So good to see him get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. How many entries did he have before getting elected in? Did it say at all?
Let me see if it says.
But yeah, I mean, for him, he had pretty much every year of his career. He had a short career. He played 7 years, but he had 65 career touchdowns. He had 6 years of 1,000 yard seasons. He had three All Pros. Was in the MVP conversation in 2 of those years. He was fourth in MVP in '92. So yeah, I mean, I feel like, especially again, like you talk about the history of the NFL, like Sterling Sharp, with what he was doing with the Green Bay Packers. It's unfortunate what happened with his career because I feel like he would have gone down as an all-time great. But good to see him recognized.
Yeah, it says too that the four-person class of 2025 is the smallest class to be inducted since 2005, when Dan Marino, Steve Young, Benny Friedman, and Fritz Pollard, okay, were all called to the Hall of Fame. They're the unusual century. This is the 19th class in the NFL's 63-year history with four or three members. A four-member class is now the smallest allowed under the Hall of Fame's current bylaws. And then Sharp was the lone man from the five seniors and coach contributor finalists to be elected. And the voting finalists is done separately from its own group, distinct from the modern era players. And a minimum of one person and a maximum of three players combined these categories may be elected under the Hall of Fame's revised bylaws here. Interesting. But small Hall of Fame
Interesting.
class.
Yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, good for the Allens. It was a good year for the Allens, I suppose. Jared Allen, Eric Allen. And then as we pivot to the NFL honors, we just got news about 10 minutes ago that Josh Allen is the MVP for 2025. I know when we talked about previewing the NFL honors, we had some pretty strong opinions about who should be the MVP, but Josh Allen is our official MVP for 2025.
It's so stupid. I don't understand why he's the MVP for 2025 at all. I guess and it's like not even based off the playoffs. I get if it was him and Lamar based on the playoffs, but this just seems like, well, we could have given it to him last year, but he led the league in turnovers. So let's go ahead and give it to Lamar. Give it to Josh Allen this year. Like Josh Allen was not the most valuable player on his team this year. Like it was Saquon Barkley, and we saw the difference that Saquon Barkley made on this Eagles team that looked lost at the end of the season. Started out 11-0 and then had lost how many straight games, and then Saquon Barkley was the player who turned all of it around. Like this is the biggest problem for the MVP award when you have a player like Saquon Barkley almost set a record, turn around a franchise and change their entire offense, where people are like, I don't think the Eagles would be without Saquon Barkley. And then you have Josh Allen, who he had like three really good games towards the end of the season. Then people are like, okay, now he's the MVP. Josh Allen's the MVP. We know Josh Allen is the MVP. And then this race is over at this point when Lamar Jackson had more touchdowns and better stats than him. Bo Nix had more passing touchdowns this season than Josh Allen did. Like, you're the 2 seed in the AFC. Like sorry, like he wasn't the MVP this year. And at this point it's just the quarterback award, because last year I thought Tyreek Hill should have been the MVP. Like stop just giving it to who you thought was the best quarterback when he wasn't even the best quarterback this year. I don't get this.
Yeah, you know what's nuts is he's also the third uh, MVP to be not a first team All Pro um, selection. So he wasn't even the first team All Pro selection for just being an All Pro player. So they had Lamar Jackson ahead of him. But the thing is that kills me about the NFL MVP is it's honestly become more politicized than the NBA MVP, which I think is also extremely flawed. The reason why Lamar Jackson didn't win this year is because of him winning last year. That was ultimately the reason. Lamar probably shouldn't have won last year. Probably should have been like a Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill potentially. But they're punishing him this year, even though this year he was excellent all year. Like, if you don't want to give it to Saquon, Lamar Jackson's numbers are better all across the board than Josh Allen. And then if we're talking about who's genuinely the most valuable player, the playoffs have proven Lamar Jackson shrunk in the playoffs. They fell to Josh Allen, and then Josh Allen go in and face the Chiefs, and he fell in fashion as well. So like, and then on the other side, we see Saquon Barkley, who's rushed for the most rushing yards in a postseason almost of all time, depending on how he plays in the Super Bowl. So like value wise, Saquon Barkley was the most valuable, and if you're just doing it as a quarterback award, then Lamar Jackson should have won, and it was a close MVP. Looks like Josh Allen had 27 first place votes and Lamar Jackson had 23, but Saquon Barkley didn't get a single first place vote, despite the fact that he had one of the greatest running back seasons of all time. Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
No, it just feels like propaganda too, because the votes were put in before the playoffs happened. Like, and we didn't even get to see like Josh Allen beat Lamar Jackson yet, because in the regular season, Lamar beat Josh Allen, and then he won multiple games this year without throwing a touchdown this season. Like the game where they beat the Colts, like that was a bad game for him. You had a game where you only scored 10 points. You played horrific versus the Texans and almost turned the ball over twice at the end of the game. Like I just don't. I feel like the only reason why they gave him the MVP award is so you can argue that he's the number 2 quarterback in the NFL at this point. He's like, there's an argument between, it was like Chris Canty, one of these terrible segments on ESPN, where he's like, well, if you look at Josh Allen's body of work compared to Joe Burrow, like there's no way you can say Joe Burrow's like in the same class as Josh Allen. It's like, what are you talking about? Like whenever he's in the playoffs, he either gets to the conference championship or the Super Bowl. And like the body of work is getting to the Super Bowl, and then he threw more touchdowns than you did this year, had more passing yards this year, and then Lamar Jackson did one thing that only Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and another quarterback had done, and all of those quarterbacks won MVP. when they did it that season, like Saquon Barkley. And then you want to talk about valuable, okay, how about Jared Goff or Jahmyr Gibbs for the Lions? Like those seem like the two most valuable players because at least they were the one seed.
Yeah, and Jared Goff finished fifth with 47. He got six third place votes. But I think it's like when I look at Saquon's numbers, right? I pulled up the last running back to win MVP, which was Adrian Peterson, and their numbers are not that different, right? So Adrian Peterson rushed for 2,097 yards. Saquon rushed for 2,005 yards. Total scrimmage, Saquon had 2,300 yards, and Adrian Peterson had 2,300 yards as well. So both of these guys had 2,300 yards. Both of them carried their team to the playoffs. And in the playoffs, I know Adrian Peterson won a playoff game for them, and Saquon Barkley has won multiple playoff games for them at this point. So if Adrian Peterson could be the MVP, why can't Saquon? And I just feel like it's changed. I don't know if we need to talk about the writers with the awards shows, but it's what you're talking about here. I feel like they're politicizing the MVP. Do I think Josh Allen had an MVP caliber season? Sure. Do I think that he's the MVP compared to Lamar and Saquon? No, not at all. As I mentioned, Saquon, the most valuable player of these five guys that were finishing top five. And then quarterback wise, like of the guys there, like Lamar Jackson had the best season. He had 42 touchdowns. He had 4 picks. Like numbers wise, Lamar Jackson crushes all of it at this point. So it doesn't make sense. It sounds like okay, Lamar Jackson's won multiple MVPs. Joe Burrow's made a Super Bowl, and obviously Mahomes is Mahomes. But Josh Allen doesn't have anything to show for it. So they basically rewarded Josh Allen on MVP so that conversation is a little bit easier for him. It's what it feels like.
No, and with Josh Allen, my biggest problem with him is not Josh Allen as a player because I do think he is a top five quarterback. But for me, a lot of people think he's closer to two than four, but I think he's closer than four than two at this point when you look at the NFL, especially when you'll have players like Jalen Daniels and then Jalen Hurts. If he balls out in the Super Bowl, he's made the Super Bowl twice now. And then I think Burrow is clearly a better quarterback than Josh Allen. It's like he's a good running back, but it just feels like the NFL media has manufactured his career at this point where yes, this guy is really talented. He's one of the most fun players to watch. He's the ideal quarterback that you want, but like the amount that he just shrinks and disappears in the playoffs versus the Chiefs where he looked like he was panicking during that whole game and he didn't even have the best numbers this year, and I'm fine if Josh Allen won an MVP if he had the best numbers across the board, and he didn't. Like Lamar had more touchdowns, more yards, and the best QBR, and he did something that only one of four quarterbacks have done, and every other quarterback won the MVP when they did that. And the only reason why you didn't give it to him is because he won last year. Like this just feels manufactured. Now they'll be like, see, MVP Josh Allen, that's is what he's an MVP quarterback now. It's like, yeah, he's an MVP caliber quarterback, but this doesn't feel deserved. And I feel like next year Josh Allen might deserve it, and they're gonna be like, well,
Let's
we
give
don't
it to
want to
Joe
give
Burrow.
it to you. Let's give
We'll
it
give it
to
to
Joe Burrow. Let's give it to
yeah,
Jaden Daniels.
yeah, exactly. Numbers of the way it ended out, right? So Josh Allen had 3,700 yards, 28 touchdowns, 6 picks. Then he had 14 rushing touchdowns, and he rushed for. Let me get the rushing numbers here. He rushed for 531 yards, had 12 rushing touchdowns, and then a receiving touchdown. Lamar Jackson, meanwhile, threw for 4,200 yards, 41 touchdowns, 4 picks. Also, he rushed for 4 touchdowns and nearly another 1,000-yard rushing season. And he was first team All Pro. So numbers crush him in every category, and then All Pro. And then, we talked about it briefly here, but the other guys that were nominated, Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow gets 1 second-place vote and 15 third-place votes. Jared Goff gets just 6 votes total for the season that he had, and Jared Goff had a great season as well. Those two guys also got shafted. It was a super competitive MVP race this year, but it's not about Josh Allen. I like Josh Allen. He's deserving of an MVP. But this season, he was not the most valuable player in my mind.
No. I mean, like, honestly, I thought Jaden Daniels should have been on there instead of Joe Burrow because he had better numbers than Lamar Jackson's MVP season, and he actually made the playoffs. You shouldn't even be on the ballot if you don't make the playoffs because you're not gonna win. Like, no one's gonna be like, oh, the MVP is someone who didn't make the playoffs. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that like makes no sense at all. So like I think Joe Burrow on this ballot was a waste, to be honest. Like sure, you almost came back and did it, but like you lost to Jacoby Brissett, and that's the reason why you're out of the playoffs. Like he wasn't the most valuable player this year, but I know the MVP that happened this year. It was literally the year of Allen. They're like, let's give Josh Allen the MVP. Let's give Eric Allen a nod to the Hall of Fame after 19 years of being eligible. And then we'll put Jared Allen in there. So I don't know what's going on in the NFL right now. If this is a precursor to the Super Bowl, this is not good because the next award makes me sick. This is terrible. What the hell do you have to do to win a coach of the year? I don't know. If you have the greatest season in franchise history, you're not the coach of the year if you're the number 1 seed. You have go 15-2. You end up being the best team in your conference, and not only do you outcoach this guy twice, you absolutely obliterate him in the last game of the season. But no, Kevin O'Connell, because the Vikings weren't supposed to be this good this year, even though they have Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, TJ Hawkinson, and Justin Jefferson on their team, and they have a good defense with Brian Flores. Like, no, we're going to take away Dan Campbell's Coach of the Year award when he's been deserving, and it feels like it should be a career award for what he's done with the Lions, where he takes one of the most pathetic franchises in NFL history, who has been the laughing stock of the league for the past 2 decades, and then he turns them into a dominant force in the regular season at this point and is the number 1 seed, and then outcoaches Kevin O'Connell and beats him twice. But no, that's not enough. We have to take Dan Campbell's award and giving it to Kevin O'Connell. And I knew this would do it because you have the storyline. They weren't supposed to be here. But hey, neither were the Lions. Like everyone thought that Dan Campbell should have been fired on day 1 after that press conference. Oh, he's wearing a biker helmet. I don't like that. He wants to bite people's kneecaps. That's offensive. That's not PC. Dan Campbell talks like a football coach. How dare he actually sound like a football player coaching other football players? It's crazy. And you had people calling for this guy to get fired, and it's like it just feels like another political narrative where you have the Josh Allen MVP, where it's like there's always been seemingly this weird media agenda against the Lions, and now Dan Campbell's award goes to Kevin O'Connell, and I think Kevin O'Connell is deserving of it, but it felt like Dan Campbell deserved it this year more. Like you're the number 1 seed.
Yeah, my other thing was like coach of the year. I agree. I agree with your sentiment on Kevin O'Connell, although I don't think it's as polarizing because he made Sam Darnold, the guy who was a perpetual draft bust, into at one point an MVP candidate. So I give him respect there because Sam Darnold was horrendous everywhere else, but he came here, he made Sam Darnold look competent. Sam Darnold threw for 30 touchdowns, so I'm fine there. It's for the rest of the award that I have issues with the voting. Right, Sean Payton was fifth with 71 total votes. Um, Dan Quinn was vote had less Coach of the Year votes than Andy Reid, and I felt like Dan Quinn, the way that the Commanders turned things around and the way that he got the most out of his players, hired the right coaches. Like I feel like Dan Quinn should be Coach of the Year over Andy Reid, in my opinion. I know that the Chiefs were 15-1, and I know that they sat the last game, but for me, like the way that the Commanders and how bad they've been with that, if we're talking about narratives here, like with the whole Dan Snyder situation, with them getting Jaden Daniels, and immediately Jaden Daniels turning things around and making them amazing right away. I feel like Dan Quinn's job is admirable, and I think he deserves respect there. Whereas the Chiefs are obviously like they've won back-to-back Super Bowls. They're a juggernaut. They should be good. So I feel like Dan Quinn should have gotten more votes. But when it comes to specifically the award between Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell, the Lions like they were the best team all season, arguably outside of the Chiefs. And again, a team that came from 3-13 to 9-8 to should have won the number 1 seed last year, but the Cowboys fucked them over. So now this year, like they played perfect football, even as their team got disintegrated with injuries, and they still managed to play through. They came up short against the Commanders, but the Lions had like a storybook season when it comes to Coach of the Year, and it's a shame that it wasn't able to be executed with Coach of the Year.
Yeah, no, this is terrible. And I'm like Kevin O'Connell's definitely deserving of it, but like if like we're gonna I feel like the coach of the year should go to the best coach that year. And like with the way the Lions have changed, like, okay, is Dan Campbell just never gonna win a coach of the year now at this point, and you have to not make the playoffs? But it feels like winning coach of the year at this point has been a precursor to your team starting to trend downwards at this point, because he had Brian Dayball. As soon as he won coach of the year, his team started trending down. Kevin O'Connell just signed an extension. Like, I feel like the Vikings are going to have a lot to figure out over the next few years, and them being good is going to be like a every other year occurrence at this point, where they'll be really good one year, then they'll kind of suck, and now you have to figure out Sam Darnold. Cat's out of the bag there. You're not going to pay him, and then you'll also have to figure out if JJ McCarthy is good, and not a lot of people think JJ McCarthy is good, because he really didn't do that much, particularly on Michigan. He just handed the
Yeah,
ball off.
and not only that, he's also coming off of this massive injury as well. So Vikings have a lot to figure out. Bears got better. Packers are always relevant, and the Lions are still the Lions. So I definitely think there's something there as well. Now, some of these other awards are not very controversial, so we won't spend too much time. Saquon Barkley, Offensive Player of the Year, like, yeah, of course, he should have been.
No
He
shit.
should have been unanimous, in my opinion.
Should have
Um,
been unanimous MVP, in my opinion.
yeah, he was excellent. And then Defensive Player of the Year, we had Pat Surtain. He won Defensive Player of the Year. No complaints there. I mean, you have some notable players like Miles Garrett, T.J. Watt there, but I mean, Pat Surtain was excellent all season. He shut down a lot of great corners, so I don't have any issues with Pat Surtain as D boy.
Yeah, I feel like it was kind of lazy to put TJ Watt on that list. Like, how do you break a record for not making a tackle and end up on a defensive player of the year list? How does that work? Exactly. And I'm a huge TJ Watt fan, but I just don't think he deserved to be on the list this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Offensive Rookie of the Year, we had a near unanimous Offensive Rookie of the Year. Jaden Daniels had 49 of the 50 first place votes. One asshole gave it to Brock Bowers, which I honestly am okay with. I think Brock Bowers should have honestly had more first place votes as well. Had a super dominant season, the best tight end season of all time for a rookie. And I think he's already in the conversation for best tight end in football. But it was Jaden Daniels. Like, it was obvious. He turned around this Commanders franchise. I gave flowers to Dan Campbell when we talked about Coach of the Year, but I mean, he turned around and he played like a top 5 quarterback all season, or at worst a top 8 quarterback in the league, and he had the best rookie season of all time. So obviously he deserves Offensive Rookie of the Year, and honestly maybe he should have been unanimous Offensive Rookie of the Year, but he wins in a landslide basically.
He wins in a landslide, and good. It's a career award for Cliff Kingsbury, because he had a resurgence this year. But Jaden Daniels, it's given that NFL hope. Maybe there's another guy out there who can rise to the same level as Patrick Mahomes, but we'll see. And I think this could be similar to remember when the Seahawks lost to Atlanta in Russell Wilson's rookie season, and then they came back and made the Super Bowl and won it. Could be similar to that. So we'll see.
I hope so. I hope so. Defensive Rookie of the Year goes to Jared Verse, which I don't have any issues with. My big takeaway from Defensive Rookie of the Year is Jared Verse and Brandon Fisk both finishing first and third. The, for a team that lost Aaron Donald, for them to immediately come back and draft the Defensive Rookie of the Year and third in Defensive Rookie of the Year, like, give a bunch of credit to the Rams organization, Sean McVay, nailing down not one but two great defensive players, and pretty much that defense, especially if they nail their draft this year, like, they have a very solid defense, and they should be contending for a while. So this, for me, this is a shout out to the Rams, and then obviously a shout out to Jared Verse too, who could have been a Defensive Player of the Year candidate too.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I definitely think that is a good lineup there. And Sean McVay, he's been casting some spells out there.
No doubt. Comeback Player of the Year, Joe Burrow.
The weirdest thing, like, okay, Joe Burrow's on there, sure, but like you're saying, like Damar Hamlin is on that list when Damar Hamlin played last year, and he played in the playoffs. Like, what did Damar Hamlin come back from? The worst play call in NFL history in that fake punt. Like, Damar Hamlin's coming back from being involved in the worst play call in NFL history. Like, sorry, like he came back last season and was also nominated for comeback player of the year. Why did they nominate him again? Is he just are they gonna sneak him on there every year to remind people that like, hey, DeMar Hamlin is here and he's back? Like, yeah, we know.
You know what? You know what this comparison is for me? This would be like if they made the Blind Side 2. Like the first Blind Side, great, motivational, fantastic. But the second one, you're like, wait, what story are they overcoming? It's just he made the pros and he's in the pros now. Like that's the story for him. Like Damar Hamlin, obviously, what happened to him was a tragedy, and it was very scary for the NFL and for everybody involved. But what is he like you mentioned? Like what is he? He's not coming back from anything. He's coming back from just fucking playing. He's just coming back from playing football at this point. He lost his window to win comeback player of the year. He's going to have to die again in order for him to be comeback player of the year, unfortunately. He didn't
Yeah.
come like it doesn't make sense. He lost his chance. Honestly, for looking back at last year, maybe he should have won over Joe Flacco, but ultimately like Joe Flacco won because of his insane run that he went on and unfortunately DeMar Hamlin's not a very good safety as it is. So, yeah, I mean at this point like why was he nominated? There's plenty of other people. We had Sam Darnold there who ended up finishing third. Honestly, probably could have finished higher, but I like that Joe Burrow won. Came back from an injury, had an MVP caliber season, so I'm fine with it. And then Sam Darnold coming back from just being ass, basically. So
Yeah.
comeback player of the year. They need to define what they're coming like. What are they coming back from? What does that mean? You can't come back
Yeah.
from just whatever they can overcame.
Yeah, it's arbitrary thing. And DeMar Hamlin himself was never a great safety, but damn, his clone pretty good. Like his clone that was playing for the Buffalo Bills this year has been good, and like maybe his clone got injured and he came back and they swapped him out for another clone of DeMar Hamlin because some people do think he actually died and the NFL panicked and they cloned him. And there's some people that believe some celebrities have different versions of themselves. Like when there was the video of Joe Biden and people were like, "Why is he 6 inches taller?" And everyone started freaking out. So there was the conspiracy theory running around. Not saying I support this, but some people do say that DeMar Hamlin has a clone. And would it be in the NFL's best interest to be like, no, a guy didn't actually die on the football field? And then Michael Strahan like asked him, he's like, hey, did you passing out on the football field have anything to do with the? He's like, no comment, can't talk about it. I'm like, okay, all right.
Hmm, that is suspicious. I don't think he got cloned, but that is an interesting conspiracy nonetheless. Um, some other notable awards: Ben Johnson wins Assistant Coach of the Year by pretty much a landslide, 29 first place votes. Feel good about that.
Terrible.
You
Terrible.
don't think?
If we're not going to give Dan Campbell Coach of the Year for being the number one seed and having the greatest season in NFL history, how about we give it to Cliff Kingsbury instead for being the best assistant coach? Because, well, he didn't coach the best offense or have the best team in the NFC. What he did do was bring an offense with a rookie that wasn't supposed to be there, who was supposed to be the number two quarterback, and then turn him into the best rookie in the NFL. If we're using the same logic we use for the Coach of the Year, then Cliff Kingsbury obviously is the assistant coach of the year. And if we're using the same logic with the MVP or the second best quarterback gets it, then like, okay, it should be Cliff Kingsbury at this point.
The funny part is Cliff Kingsbury wasn't even nominated. It wasn't even a Final Five election. In fact, number two was Brian Flores, which to me, I'm like, I mean, Brian Flores is a good DC. Don't get me wrong, and I think he deserves flowers. But finishing second, like Aaron Glenn finished third, and then we had Vic Fangio and Joe Brady respectfully. But like Brian Flores at two, I don't know. I don't agree with that, but I don't hate Ben Johnson winning coach of the assistant coach of the year. Obviously, with how good the Lions are, but I feel like he kind of cucked Dan Campbell a little bit. I feel like maybe he should have won also. He could have had both.
Why was Aaron Glenn on there? Their defense wasn't that good. It was fine. And it was good when they had like players there, and I guess he like kept it together, but it's like Aaron Glenn didn't deserve to be on assistant coach of the year above someone like Cliff Kingsbury here. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I don't love that. Aaron Glenn finished third, by the way. He had six first place votes, and yeah, finished just above Vic Fangio. Even though the fact that the
Hmm.
defense fell apart and they were the worst defense statistically in the NFL the last 6 weeks of the season.
Yeah, he finished above Vic Fangio, who had the best defense in the NFL. Again,
Yeah.
players and coaches who don't have as dominant of a team. So the standard for being assistant coach or MVP isn't being the best anymore. Like this year of NFL awards has kind of tainted it for me personally.
What sucks is that people are going to forget about what we're talking about. And so in future dialogues, we're going to say, well, Josh Allen's an MVP. Oh, well, Ben Johnson, assistant coach of the year. Kevin O'Connell, coach of the year. He's a good coach. Like, the problem is that with these awards, and same with the Pro Bowl to some extent, is that this is changing historical narratives around them with that. Like, Josh Allen is now an MVP, so he will always be respected as an MVP. Same with, everything else we mentioned here. Coach of the year. Kevin O'Connell, I think Kevin O'Connell is a fine head coach, great head coach, actually. But him winning coach of the year at this point, just like the similar arc you mentioned with Brian Daboll. Like Brian Daboll had that one good season with Daniel Jones where he's making Daniel Jones fine, just a fine player, not even a good player. And then ever since they've been terrible. Like I don't think we're going to see that same necessary like fall with the Vikings, but are they going to go back to being 8-9 like everyone thought they were going to be? Probably. I can see that. Maybe they're going to be worse because they have to deal with the Bears and the Packers and the Lions. Like, if anybody's the odd duck there, it's the Vikings for sure. Granted, we said that last year, but still, you get the idea.
Yeah, no. And, I feel like the Bears will still be the odd duck this year, but we'll see when it comes down to it with Ben Johnson there. But it's like with Brian Dayball and the Giants, it's like we got home. It was like, want to smoke a cigar on the porch? Sure. And then we got back and it was like 21-0 in the first quarter. I was like, oh. Then we were just in awe of how badly the Giants got beat in that game, where it's like one of those, it's like watching trains hitting things. You just can't look away.
I think that game finished I think it was like 38-7, and they had their backup in at one point. Didn't we see
Yeah.
a sighting? Whoever the backup for the quarter, I think we saw Marcus Mariota for the Eagles at that game
It's
because
probably
of how
Colt
much of a
McCoy or
blowout.
something who came in
Yeah,
for the Giants.
yeah. Well, no, I'm saying for the Viking, I'm pretty sure the Eagles pulled Jalen Hurts, and they just
Hurts.
had Marcus Mariota at the time
Yeah, I think it was
play that
Mariota.
game. Yeah, which is wild. I don't know if there's any other awards to go over that we missed. I mean, Walter Payton goes to Arik Armstead. So the best tax write-off of the year goes to Arik Armstead. Congrats on all your contributions.
Yeah, and then the FedEx air and ground players of the year are Josh Allen and Jamar Chase. Again, oh my God. You're the air player of the year, but you don't have the best passing yards or passing touchdowns. Make it make
The
sense.
fuck does this? What does this word even mean exactly?
So each week for the NFL, there's like the FedEx Air Player and Ground Player of the week, and then there's like an award for at the end of the year. And then Josh Allen wins this again when Lamar had a better season than him. Joe Burrow had more passing yards and more passing touchdowns than him. Jamar Chase won at wide receiver, which makes sense because he was the best receiver in the NFL. But I still like Josh Allen wins another award, and it continues to be the Allen Awards propaganda campaign. And then Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award, Josh Allen winning another award. They made up an award so they could give him another one. Like he won 3 awards at the NFL honors. Like the Art Rooney Sportsmanship Award. Like what?
Yeah, I don't get that. Then they had like a couple of moments here. We had Jaden Daniels Hail Mary to win against the Bears as the moment of the year, which I honestly agree with. To be honest, that was insane. And then like a couple of other awards. Trey Hendrickson won the sacks leader. Saquon won the Jim Brown Award. Um, I don't know if there's any other awards to go over after that, but
No, not that we care about. I am over this awards propaganda campaign. As I said too, I was like, if Josh Allen wins an MVP and Ben Roethlisberger never did in his career, it's going to make me sick because he's not going to have as good of a career as him either. He's not going to get to 3 Super Bowls and win 2.
no, not in this iteration. I would agree with that. I'm also looking at the Hall of Fame here. My one beef, going back to the Hall of Fame conversation, Luke Kuechly didn't make it, and he was a nominee, and I forgot that he was nominated. Luke Kuechly should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Easily. He was the best linebacker in the league at one point.
And it sucks because it's because of his injuries getting cut. I feel like it's because of him having a shorter career that they're punishing him. But there's no doubt in anybody's mind that he's like arguably the best or one of the best linebackers of all time. So that's bullshit.
Yeah. But that's the awards. You've been recapped. You've been previewed. We didn't preview for the awards, but you get the idea. This is a preview episode. And then there's a game this week, I guess. There's the Chiefs and the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Few people have
No.
talked about this game
It's
happening.
it's the big game. It's the big game. It's the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 59. Potential three-peat on the line, or the Eagles back to back could potentially break up not one but two three-peats potentially. This game, here it is, the Super Bowl. We're ready for it.
Yeah, no, we're ready for the Super Bowl at this point. And then you mentioned it. So last time the Eagles won the Super Bowl was with Nick Foles at the helm, and they had Doug Peterson here versus Tom Brady. And the Patriots were going for a three-peat that year, and they ended up stopping the Patriots from winning the Super Bowl in one of the most entertaining Super Bowls the Patriots and Tom Brady had ever played in, where this Super Bowl was a shootout, ended up coming down to a Tom Brady fumble at the end of the game. But this game was back and forth, and now Philadelphia having a chance to break up another three-peat, and then the Philadelphia Eagles come into this game clearly as the better team. They have the better roster in this situation. Offensively, they have more talent. They have the best offensive line in the league. They have the best running back, and they have the NFL MVP, Saquon Barkley, on their team. They have A.J. Brown, who's better than anyone on the Kansas City Chiefs, and you can argue that Dallas Goedert has had a better year than Travis Kelce. They have Mahomes, so he's better than Jalen Hurts. And then defensively, you have two of the best defenses in the NFL going head to head this year, but something just tells you it's like, well, it's the Chiefs, so they always know how to win football games. It's always close. So what are your thoughts on this game initially coming into it? It's like we haven't made any predictions yet. This is the Thursday before the NFL game, so this is as close you're going to get as much as a same day prediction. What are your thoughts heading into this game with what's led up to it in the regular season? And what are your thoughts just on a rematch with the Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, and the Eagles kind of sneakily being one of the more dominant franchises over the past decade here, making 3 Super Bowls?
Yeah, honestly, my biggest thing looking into it. So we have two of the best teams that were here all season. Um, Everything you mentioned with the Eagles, I agree with. As far as like roster wise, I think the Eagles are better, and I'm interested to see how Saquon Barkley will play in this game because I think that this could ultimately decide the game. But I also think that the Chiefs have the best coaching by a mile. Like Andy Reid is a better coach than Nick Sirianni, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Like they are well coached. They're on the path for their three-peat, and they're going to be the closest one to get to the three-peat, even if they don't win this game. So as much as it kills me to say, I think the Chiefs have the best chance in this game. They just they're always the most prepared. They always have the most luck. They have weird voodoo magic on their side. And I think they have the Illuminati as well with Taylor Swift. So the Chiefs scare me in that aspect. The Eagles scare me in the fact that they have Saquon Barkley and they have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and Jalen Hurts and all these other guys on their offense. But something tells me that the Chiefs, with their weird voodoo magic, with the Taylor Swift love, that the Chiefs are going to win this. We're going to see the first three-peat in NFL history. And, we haven't seen a three-peat in about 20 years. It hasn't been since Shaq and Kobe. And I feel like the sports world needs a three-peat. And for this, like, the NFL wants to see Patrick Mahomes eventually either eclipse or have that GOAT argument like we have in the NBA with LeBron and Michael Jordan. This is going to be the equivalent in the NFL with Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, where he can say, well, I've won a three-peat, I've won 4 Super Bowls, and he's going to ultimately win more, it seems like. And then, obviously, the NBA, it's a much more different debate, but you get the idea. The NFL wants this. They want the Chiefs to win. The refs have been on the side for the Chiefs pretty much this entire time. And that's why I think the Chiefs are going to win this game ultimately and have their three-peat and begin the nauseating GOAT debate that we have in the NBA, but now we'll have it in the NFL, unfortunately. Um, but good for overall, I guess, for just ratings and whatnot. But I think the Chiefs will win this game.
Yeah, and then also there's another thing you told me about Vic Fangio. He had a stat versus Patrick Mahomes, so I don't want to
He's
steal your stat.
Yes, he is 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes has 14 touchdowns to 0 picks in those games. So when he plays, he is nails against Vic Fangio's, and he just knows how to break down his defense. So I feel like right now the over under is 48.5. I feel confident taking the over, despite the fact that both defenses are excellent. And the spread is favored on the Chiefs by just 1 point. So I would take the over and I would take the Chiefs in this, and I feel confident saying that.
Yeah, and in this situation, you have the Eagles, and the Eagles are coming off like a meltdown last season. They kind of have a renewed team this year, but you have Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio now, and you're giving Andy Reid and um, Spagnola 2 weeks to prepare for the Philadelphia Eagles. But when you look at the Eagles, you had the best defense in the NFL this year, and you have players like Jalen Carter on your defense. You have a great rookie at corner this year. You have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And then you look at Saquon Barkley being the NFL MVP of 2025 this season, according to the most accurate sports show in sports, with better opinions than whoever retards voted for Josh Allen. And then you have the Eagles, and Saquon almost sets a record this year, and then you have him, and then Jalen Hurts suddenly woke up in the conference championship game, and he was making really good throws. He was running out of the pocket, and then him on fourth down connecting with AJ Brown. It seems like Nick Sirianni and the Eagles have kind of really found their mojo, and then going into this game, you have the Chiefs on the other side going for a three-peat, and you're going up against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, who you have DeAndre Hopkins, who's kind of older, Hollywood Brown, who's kind of older. I mean, Samaje Perine was the player who made the game sealing play versus the Buffalo Bills. Like Samaje Perine was the one who made the biggest play of the game versus the Bills. So you look at that with the Eagles having the best defense in the NFL. It's like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter because no one in their right mind can envision Jalen Hurts beating Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. And if he does, good. But guess what? There is zero pressure on the Kansas City Chiefs. They've been there. We've done that. This is another day in the office. The weight of the world is on the Philadelphia Eagles right now. You want to talk about an entire world uniting behind a team. I mean, this is a monumental moment where you have a situation where everyone outside of that small piece of Kansas City is rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles, and you have some football purists that want to see a three-peat for the first time, but like you have the most pressure of any team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl. No, like everyone wants to see the Chiefs lose. Everyone was miserable when they beat the Buffalo Bills. Like, like sorry to get your hopes up, but the Bills are never going to beat the Chiefs. But like everyone wants to see the Philadelphia Eagles win. So I can't see them rising to the occasion with that amount of pressure. And I've seen holes in their game versus the Commanders, where if the Commanders don't have 3 fumbles in that game, I feel like that game is much closer versus the Rams that felt like they could be had in that game, where it feels like the Chiefs are always in control in the playoffs in each game. And versus Buffalo, throughout that entire game, it felt like Buffalo never had a chance to win. And it's great that you have Saquon Barkley. The 49ers had Christian McCaffrey last year when Christian McCaffrey had one of the best seasons of his career. They had Deebo Samuel, they had George Kittle, they had Nick Bosa, one of the best defenses, but they had Brock Purdy, and you have someone who is 0-8 versus Patrick Mahomes at coordinator, and you're going to tell me that Kellen Moore is going to come up with a game plan versus the Kansas City Chiefs defense that is going to be like, yes, Kellen Moore is going to outcoach Steve Spagnola. Are you out of your goddamn mind? So yeah, I'm going with the Kansas City Chiefs for the three-peat. And if the Eagles win, fine, that's great. But like, there's no way I can pick in good conscience Jalen Hurts to win versus Patrick Mahomes. The last Super Bowl, it came down to a Jalen Hurts fumble. I think the same thing's gonna play out again. It's gonna be either Jalen Hurts fumble or turnover that ends up losing them the game here, and then Philadelphia fans are gonna riot in the street again.
Yeah, I think they're going to ride in the street whether they win or lose, just with how Philly is at this point. But I think for me, if the Eagles win this game, and I think the chances of them winning is obviously, 50-50 roughly, but Saquon Barkley is going to be the narrative. Like, if they can stop Saquon Barkley, then the Chiefs are going to win. And it's not going to be, I wouldn't say it's going to be a blowout, but it's going to be, they're going to be able to contain the Eagles. But if Saquon goes off and he rushes for 150 yards, then when they win, this is going to go down as the greatest running back season, arguably of all time, and the greatest revenge tour in the history of sports, potentially. The fact that the Eagles and rival Giants didn't want to pay you your money. They didn't want to pay you $15 million a year. You go to Philadelphia, you go on this insane tear. You're third in the MVP, probably should have won, according to the Brickyard. And you culminate that with a Super Bowl. Like, this is going to be the greatest revenge possibly ever. And it's going to be about Saquon Barkley, less than it's going to be about Jalen Hurts and what Jalen Hurts does potentially, or just the Eagles team in general. Like, this Eagles team is a super team, essentially, and it's carried by Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, no, it's a super team, and then there's also another revenge tour with Nick Sirianni because it feels like the media gave him the small dick treatment after they lost in the playoffs last year. This hung him out to dry, embarrassed him. They're like, "Look at this guy outside in the cold. You can't even see anything there." Like, that's kind of the treatment that Nick Sirianni got last year, and everyone was calling for him to be fired, saying he's not the answer. And now everyone this year is like, Nick Sirianni, he knows how to put systems in place, roots growing with a strong foundation. And it's like suddenly this guy is Jesus. And you look at his coordinators, it's like Kellen Moore has been a failed coordinator in Dallas, and he was with the Chargers last year. And then Vic Fangio wasn't having his greatest time either in Miami, and he brings those two coordinators in, and they get Saquon Barkley. Like, this is also a revenge tour for him as well. And then people saying that Jalen Hurts was washed. But the problem is that's what's going to put so much pressure on them. And you said it's like a 50-50 game. Like, I feel like this is 70-30 at this point, where it's going to be a massive upset if the Philadelphia Eagles win this game when they should be the favorite because they have the best team in this situation.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. I think roster wise, defensively, I would take the Eagles. Offensively, I take their offensive line. I take Saquon. I take their receiver core. And tight end, maybe I still take Kelsey, but not it's not as close as it was a couple of years ago either. So again, yeah, the between the NFL narrative and what they want the Chiefs to win this game. What are the basically outside of what I just mentioned with Saquon? Like, what's the narrative? He's not going to become Patrick Mahomes, Eli Manning. Like, that's not what's happening here. I think we have a better chance of that being Jaden Daniels potentially next year. Like, the NFL plays out like a storybook, just like the NBA does as well. It's like in this scenario, I think about the narratives that will come from an Eagles win. And if I take out what I just said about Saquon Barkley, like, there's really not another narrative except for they upset the three-peat and they rejected the three-peat. When it would have been better for the NFL if the Chiefs win. Ultimately, it's better for them if the Chiefs win. They have their three-peat. They have their certified dynasty, the dynasty that they already have. And then next year we can give it to someone else after they have their three-peat. They're not going to win four.
Yeah, no. And I feel like that's kind of the case right now. And like the media has asked the Chiefs about the 15-yard phantom calls, but like I just trust the Chiefs not to make a mistake when it's going to matter. When the Eagles, they haven't turned the ball over as much, but it's taken the Rams turning the ball over multiple times. It's taken the Packers and Jordan Love like turning into a shell of himself in that game and turning the ball over. And there's still moments where it felt like the Packers could have gained momentum back in that game. And then really that Eckler fumble is what did the Commanders in, where it's like, even though you had the two previous fumbles, there was a point in that game where it felt like the momentum was shifting back to the Commanders and they had a real shot of winning that game. Like, sorry, like Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo with time to prepare is just not going to fly.
Yeah, it's just not going to fly. Outcoached, NFL on their side. I think we feel pretty confident with the Chiefs as far as them winning this game. Now, I guess we have to talk about like the pace of this game. The Chiefs in every Super Bowl that they've been in they've been down by 10 points at one point and they come back and win it. Do you think that this is a scenario where they have that same thing happen, where in the second half they're down by 10, they make the right plays, and they ultimately end up prevailing? Do you think they'll have that same narrative as the Niners and what we saw with um, the other game as well?
with the Niners and yeah, no, because I think with this game, the game plan is defense with offense in this situation, and the best way to play defense in this game is to make Jalen Hurts pass the ball and put the ball in his hands. And I'm not saying by any means that Jalen Hurts is a bad quarterback, but what do you prefer? Jalen Hurts trying to throw the Eagles out of a deficit, or the Eagles having a lead and then just pounding the ball with Saquon Barkley? Because in this game, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs, you understand we can't fall behind to the Philadelphia Eagles, because now that just gives them the right to run it with Saquon Barkley. Then they're not gonna turn the ball either, because Jalen Hurts has been great this year of not turning the ball over when the Philadelphia Eagles have a lead. So I feel like the Kansas City Chiefs understand that this time they can't just lollygag and fall behind 10 points. This is a defense that's too good to fall behind against, where they can just tee off on Patrick Mahomes and then he can pick up a 15-yard penalty. But I feel like in this situation, the Chiefs are actually going to come out, probably want the ball first, and then come up 7-0. And I feel like it's going to be a pretty even pace throughout the game, where it's going to be close, but similar to the Bills game, where it never really feels like the Eagles had a chance, even though it was like maybe a three-score game. But I'm going to predict that this is going to be a 5-point game, and the Chiefs end up winning this 28-23.
Yeah, I like that narrative here. For me, I do think that it's easier to prepare. The Eagles, what we've seen all season, it's been Saquon Barkley rushing for over 100 yards. I think he has the most 100-yard games in a regular season in NFL history. So, like, the Eagles, not to say that they haven't won multiple different ways, but historically, the way they've won this year has been through Saquon Barkley. And in times that he hasn't prevailed, and it's the reason why they've lost. If you look at all three of their games that they've lost this year, it's been because of a not as great game from Saquon. So the lenience that they have in the offense with Saquon, the Chiefs know, like, if we can take down Saquon Barkley, which is obviously a tall task, the Eagles will be off shelter. And when they have to rely on Jalen Hurts, like, Jalen Hurts has made big plays at certain points, but ultimately they have not asked much of Jalen Hurts at all. It took him 10 weeks to throw for over 200 yards from week 4 to week 15. So again, like, I think the Chiefs this year, they've proven that they can win in a shootout like we saw against the Bills, and what we've seen in previous games as well. We've seen them win super close games, a defensive battle. The Chiefs have won so many different ways just this year alone, leaning on the Carson Steeles of the world or the Isaiah Pacheco's. The Eagles have really just relied on Saquon, at least on their offensive side of the ball. So with how they've been there as well, like, I think we see this game start out. I do think the Eagles will take the early lead, and then the Chiefs will come pounding back. And then ultimately, fourth quarter, I see the Eagles with a small lead, and then the Chiefs end up marching down the field and scoring a touchdown in the final minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll be predictable and painful for people to watch, because it's going to be a slow burn at the end of the game where the Chiefs end up coming back and winning. The one thing, like, the one area of concern that you can point to with the Kansas City Chiefs is the run game, but they can kind of create a run game with quick passes and screen plays and kind of swing routes out of the backfield. So there's definitely ways to create a run game without actually having to run the ball, which is really the argument against the Chiefs winning. But like, when you talk about narratives in this game, like, if Jalen Hurts wins the Super Bowl and he throws for like 202 yards, 2 touchdowns, and Saquon Barkley rushes for 150 yards and a touchdown, and maybe he has a receiving touchdown, like, who is Jalen Hurts at this point in the NFL landscape? Because he's gotten to 2 Super Bowls, and he had a big part to do with the first one, because like, your running back was Miles Sanders. So, and then I feel like in that conference championship game, anytime they needed him to be dialed in, pick up a fourth down, some of the touchdown throws that he had were really impressive in that game. Like, can you argue, like, okay, maybe Jalen Hurts, if he goes toe to toe with Patrick Mahomes and outduels him, he's the number 2 quarterback in the NFL, and you really can't say anything against it, because he's gotten to 2 Super Bowls, and then he'd be one of 3 people to beat Patrick Mahomes.
I feel like I wouldn't put him at number 2. I feel like I would still put Lamar or Burrow or Allen there. But I think he's locked into that number. The answer will be then the top five at that point is Jalen Hurts there. Remember that Jalen Hurts was also in that MVP conversation 2 years ago, and the Chiefs ended up, obviously, Patrick Mahomes ends up winning. I think he wins the Super Bowl. We're poised to see him win the MVP this following year, especially with how we've seen the MVP votes go the last few years. So he would win that. That would legitimize him. I think you could argue him at that number two spot, and having that Super Bowl, something that Lamar doesn't have, something that Burrow doesn't have, something that Josh Allen doesn't have. As these other guys are entering the mix and becoming a part of this Mahomes era, I think that he'll have some legitimacy behind himself because of it.
Yeah, for sure. And then he'll have like an actual case behind himself, and then it'll separate him from someone like Matt Ryan, someone like Philip Rivers, Donovan McNabb, or Michael Vick. Just as these running quarterbacks. And then if he's like, and he also rises to the occasion in the playoffs. I feel like where sure they didn't ask a lot of him this season, but like the Chiefs didn't ask a lot of Patrick Mahomes this season either. Does that mean he's bad? No. And Jalen Hurts has had his MVP caliber season, where he finished number two in MVP voting.
Yeah, I think that this year is an easier year to disrespect Jalen Hurts just because you've had he's had the DeAndre Swifts of the world and the Miles Sanders and Boston Scotts, where this year they give Saquon the ball, he rushes, an average of 7 yards a carry. They pound the rock with him. This year, he still was efficient. He didn't throw a lot of interceptions. He had 3,000 yards, and then he was also efficient on the ground. So this is an easy year for you to maybe discredit him, but also 2 years ago, he was second in the MVP, and he arguably could have won ultimately.
Yeah, no, he arguably could have won that series. And then, what do you just think of this whole narrative of Jalen Hurts, where media members keep asking him, like, Jalen, do you have any advice so I can be as handsome as you are walking around? It was like the
What was
whole
this?
narrative of around Jalen Hurts is like, Jalen, you're so handsome. How are you so handsome, Jalen?
I mean, he is a handsome guy. He's a stud. Don't get me wrong. What was his response to that when they asked him? It's
He
just a
said,
weird question to ask.
"Oh, I can't help you there, brother. I guess for me, it's just genetics."
Damn. Well, that's a
He
sick
does
answer,
have
actually.
like as far as like aging, he has the best skin tone for sure. Like as far as we're talking about, just like aging in general, like there's a reason why they say it doesn't crack, and like it's true. And then he's got like the goatee, the earrings, and like the fashion. So it's like I've never seen so many dudes been like, "Damn, Jalen Hurts kind of nice with it though," in the wrong way. I'm like, bro, are we talking about football or are we talking about fucking other men? What are we doing?
Yeah, it's an interesting. That's an interesting soliloquy, actually. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm excited for the Super Bowl. What I hope for both of us, and I guess for anybody watching, is I pray, and I think we should both pray here, is hope that we don't have a Super Bowl party where we have somebody there just there for the commercials. If there's a pet peeve that I have, is watching the Super Bowl with people who only watch the commercials, because those
Oh,
people are actually nauseating. Those people should just hang out with people who are just like them in the Super Bowl. I don't want to hear the commercial nonsense that we hear each and every time.
yeah, the commercial nonsense and the halftime nonsense where I'm just here for the halftime show. And then you have all these people on social media like, oh, what a halftime show. Or all the boomers like, I'm horrified at the state of music today. I remember when we had nice artists like Vince Neil and Ozzy Osbourne. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're sick of the music today. You just all the people commenting about the halftime, and the people like, I'm just here for the commercials. Like, please shut up. Like it makes me want to take this bottle and throw it at you, made of glass. Like they make me want to throw glass at you at this point. Like please just watch the game. Like you can comment on the game if you want to, but I don't know the Super Bowl personally. People like having big Super Bowl parties. Like it's one of the football games that I prefer to watch alone.
Yeah, honestly,
Like
me
it's a
too.
big game.
Yeah, it's a huge game, and I feel like for real NFL or big, I should say, dedicated NFL fans, they're not going to want to hear casuals just whispering in their ear about the refs and everything else. Like basically what Twitter and X and everybody else has talked about. Um, so yeah, I mean, so we know now, we're predicting the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. And we talked about the NFL honors with Josh Allen winning MVP over Saquon and Lamar. We've talked about NBA trades and a number of else, but there is one thing that we're forgetting when it comes to the Brickyard and the staple of our show. Let's talk about the greatness, the excellence, the documents being unleashed as far as the excellent top five Super Bowl, um, the top five teams according to the Brickyard when it comes to the Super Bowl year.
Yeah, so Super Bowl week, heading into the Super Bowl, a lot happened this week. A lot of trades in the NBA, so we have something to do with that. Something for everyone. We have something for senior citizens as well again this week. And at number 5, we had this team shockingly make an appearance last week, and everyone's like, I can't believe you put that person on the top 5 and doing it again. Another scammer getting a job in the NFL. Congratulations to Chip Kelly of UNH, Manchester graduate from New Hampshire, the homeland, representing the 603 now in Las Vegas. What? I mean, you hired Pete Carroll. He decided, like, you know what? Too many old people are out here getting scammed. I want to scam the Raiders out of a job. And not only are we going to do that, we're going to hire Chip Kelly as our offensive coordinator. You know, his job, like, let's try and get to the line as fast as possible and snap it, and then we'll have the quickest 3 and outs in NFL history, and my defense is going to be gassed by the end of the game. It's like this guy plays offense for the other team with how tired that he makes his defense when he's the offensive coordinator. So Chip Kelly, great college coach. His vibe fits that college game a lot better, but now he's reappearing in the NFL where we have an outdated staff with Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly. But congratulations to Chip Kelly for getting a job with the Raiders, scamming them out of millions of dollars. So I had to shout out Chip Kelly for representing the 603. At number 4, Golden State Warriors. You went out there and you didn't do nothing. You actually paired Steph Curry with the star and Jimmy Butler. And a lot of people are like, well, actually, Andrew Wiggins could be better than Jimmy Butler. Long term for this team's like, no, Andrew Wiggins isn't going to carry Bam Adebayo, Gabe Vincent, and Max Strus and Caleb Martin to an NBA Finals, not once, but twice. Like, that's simply not going to happen. And your argument is immediately invalidated there. It's like, oh, he's only averaging 17 points in the regular season so far. In a year where he's getting suspended because he doesn't want to be with the Miami Heat because they don't want to offer him a contract. And also, Jimmy Butler is not a regular season player. He is a playoff performer. There's a reason why they call it playoff Jimmy, not regular season Jimmy like Joel Embiid, not regular season James Harden. Like, it is playoff Jimmy Butler, and now you signed him to a 2-year extension, and you can build a team around him and Steph Curry over the next few years. I'm excited. You have 2 players who have been to the finals now with him. Curry, Draymond Green also still on that team. Him and Gary Payton Jr. and Draymond all on the floor at the same time. I feel like that's going to be an elite wing defensive lineup there. So at number 4, the Golden State Warriors. And then at number 3, I just have to give this team a shout out because when we talked about the trade deadline, it felt like every time we talked about it, we had to give them a shout out. So the Utah Jazz, congratulations to you for finding a way to now put yourself in one of the most controversial trades in NFL history where you have adults saying, you know what, laying out in the middle of traffic feels like a great idea right now. And it feels like something I would enjoy. I'm just going to walk on Interstate I 35, lay on the highway. And I feel like that's what I want to do. I have people saying I stayed up until 3 a.m. pacing around my room, wondering where it all went wrong and how this happened. We have people carrying around a casket downtown in Dallas, and now Utah found a way to make themselves mentioned in that conversation where they were a part of the Luka Doncic trade, and they're seemingly part of every single trade of the trade deadline this year. Not only that, but last year. So the ultimate shout out award, which is what the Jazz are going to get. Utah Jazz at number 3. Somehow they find a way to be involved in every single trade. You need to get some second round picks involved in a trade. Call Utah. They'll help you out. So at number 4, we have Utah. At number 2, obviously, it is the Lakers and Rob Pelinka for just fleecing the Dallas Mavericks. And the Dallas Mavericks may have planned this because they want the casino there, but now Luka Doncic being a Laker, he's going to be your future over the next few years. You have the Lakers who now trade your most valuable asset. And for me, it didn't make sense when JJ Redick decided to be the Lakers head coach. I'm like, the Lakers really don't have a future unless they trade Anthony Davis. And they went out there, traded Anthony Davis, and actually got a deal done. So Rob Pelinka's kind of got the short end of the stick. People like to blame him for every single problem that the Lakers have, along with Jeannie Buss. But Rob Pelinka goes out there, gets the trade done for Luka Doncic. So at number 2, have the Los Angeles Lakers for scamming the Mavs. And at number 1, we have a team who is in the Super Bowl this year and a team who cannot leave the number 1 spot unless they lose the Super Bowl this week. It's the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, there is no way that the Chiefs can be removed from the number 1 spot until if they win the three-peat, they're just going to have the list is going to be named everyone outside of the Kansas City Chiefs 1 through 5, because then it would get boring them putting number 1. But until they lose or win the Super Bowl this year, they are pinned at number 1. They have a chance to make NFL history and get a three-peat. Patrick Mahomes has a chance to now give himself 4 rings before the age of 30. Then he only has 4 more to go to pass Tom Brady, when technically he could probably play 11 to 12 more years. So he could be setting himself up for the greatest run in NFL history. This team is setting themselves up to become the greatest team in NFL history. So at number 1 has to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
The top 5 teams and top 5 things according to the Brickyard in the Super Bowl. You had it here. The Chiefs have a chance to achieve history. We'll be here to break it down next week when we talk about the aftermath of the Super Bowl, the NBA, and the post-trade deadline National Basketball Association. We'll be here to break it all down and a whole lot more this upcoming week, with news coming soon with future changes. So you won't want to miss it. And we're here to break it all down.
Yeah, and then, what other list will have Chip Kelly, the Utah Jazz, all on the same list wrapped together? You're not going to see it any other place. So that's why, importantly, tell the Super Bowl recap. Stay brick.
Stay break. Lovely. I think we got to do more lists, man. Our